One of the things that's interesting about talking about the thinking environment in the first place is, what is it? I mean, what do we mean when we talk about a thinking environment? And it's a natural thing, but as soon as you start talking about it, it sounds like a thing. And people often wonder, is it a methodology? Is it a theory? Is it a model? So I find it tricky just even talking about the thinking environment, because it's not really any of those things. It's a way of being. It's a way of treating each other. It's an awareness, if you like. But I do have to talk about it because I teach it. And so one of the ways that I talk about it when I teach it is that there are 10 components, which are the 10 ways of being, 10 awarenesses, if you like, which if we treat each other in this way, if we be interested, if we be equal, if we be at ease, if we be appreciative, and so on, we will be creating a thinking environment for each other. And then when you're working with groups of people and you're wanting to create a thinking environment in that group, and you're wanting to create an experience of being in a thinking environment for the group, in addition to the 10 components, there are 4 building blocks that you want to think about. And we call them building blocks because if you think about building blocks when you were a kid, the ones that had letters of the alphabet on them, you could put them together in different ways to make different words. So in the same way, the building blocks of a thinking environment are these interchangeable processes that you can use in different combinations in order to create the kind of experience that you want for the group that you're working with. So I want to talk about the 4 building blocks of a thinking environment. And the first one that I want to talk about is rounds. Rounds, in actual fact, is not something that Nancy Klein or those of us that work in the thinking environment discovered or created. I think rounds are probably one of the most ancient and deeply indigenous ways of gathering that we have as human beings. And I like to imagine that the first round happened just after we discovered fire, because as soon as we discovered fire, the very best idea was to sit round it. And then once you were sitting round the fire, I like to imagine people looked up and looked into each other's eyes and took turns to say, probably at that stage, how nice it was to be warm for a change. But when we use rounds in a thinking environment, the idea is that we are creating a process which enables the 10 components of the thinking environment to be expressed. And particularly, I think, in rounds, it's the first 3 components of a thinking environment that immediately sort of settle in whenever we do a round. So what do you do in order to do a round? Well, one of the principles that we have in the thinking environment is that the human mind thinks best in the presence of a question. The minute someone asks you a question, you start thinking about your answer to it, your response to that question. So if you choose to use rounds as a tool when you're working in groups, as a facilitator method, then the first thing that you need to think about is, what thinking do I want from the group? And what question would I need to ask them in order to encourage and enable that thinking? Once you propose the question, you then ask for a volunteer to start. One of the things that's nice about asking a volunteer to start is that it's completely in keeping with the component of equality. One of the things that we have to be careful about and mindful of as facilitators is that we automatically have more power than the other people in the room, because we're the one that is shaping the experience and deciding where we go next. So it's nice to allow a volunteer to start the round, because then people have some time to think, and when someone feels ready, they can choose to start. And that's a very different experience to being picked on by the facilitator and being told that you're ready. which can leave people feeling put on the spot and isn't really in keeping with the component of ease. So you say what the question is, you give people some time to think, and you just let the group know that when someone feels ready, they can start. And then you say what direction the round is going to go in, either to the left of the person that started or to the right. And quite simply, each person in turn will say what they think in response to the question that's been asked. One of the things that I'm always mindful of waking people up to when we're engaging in rounds, in groups, is that if you're actually going to be listening to the person that's taking their turn, what you're going to have to do is not be rehearsing what you're going to say when your turn comes, which again is, I think, one of the inevitable bad habits we picked up somewhere along the line in the educational system, that one of being ready so that if the teacher picked on you, you would have something to say. So, and of course it is inevitable when I say what the question is for a round that you are going to start thinking about what you want to say when your turn comes. But as soon as the first volunteer starts, you have to let go of that. If you want to be creating a thinking environment for them, you want to be keeping your eyes on the eyes of the person that's taking their turn and be being interested in what they think in response to the question and not thinking about what you're going to say when your turn comes. And when that happens in groups, what starts to happen is that what you thought you might say when you first heard the question actually often changes by the time your turn comes, because you've been impacted by the thinking of the other people in the group. And so what starts to happen is, even though each person is answering the question from their own perspective and from their own point of view, we're being influenced and shaped by the turns that come before us. And then we can be at ease when our turn comes. If you're an introvert, you don't have to have something ready. You can pause. You can think about what other people have said. You can think about the question afresh for yourself and say what you think, and then hand the turn over to the person that comes after you in the round.